the entity taking over the woman's body can get into all kinds of real sordid kink. It could get into all kinds of perverted activities, and the woman is just out of her body just watching this, saying, that's not me, I wouldn't do any of those things. So that's also been reported, that they can take over the consciousness, the body of a person while they're having intercourse. Later on, I will explain some of the mechanics and dynamics as far as the hybrid hosting process. For now, just keep in mind that there are some psychics have the ability, when they look at a person, whether they're on TV, out in public, they can literally see a reptilian entity overshadowing the person. We call that person a host because they're wittingly or unwittingly hosting a reptilian entity. So keep that point in mind. It's very important. One of the things that the reptilians also do to women is they, like I said before, they strive to create as much pain and anguish within the people. This could be for male abductees as well. A very common tactic that the reptilians do is they contrive to create a lower back injury. And what this does is it causes that abductee to not only feel physical anguish and physical pain, but emit that energy, emit emotions and energies of suffering, of pain, anguish, and hopelessness. What the reptilians do is they develop strongholds within us. One inevitable byproduct of a lot of these experiences is the abductee will resort to self-medication. I can speak from experience because when I was in high school, I had a lot of abduction experiences. And I know if I had a choice of laying there in bed, and when I was a kid it was extreme, I'd be laying beneath a veritable mountain of pillows and blankets and stuff with the lights turned on, okay, because I was scared. I didn't know why I was scared. But as I got older in high school, I still didn't realize what was going on, although I was having a lot of experiences. But I knew that if I had a choice of laying in bed, frightened at some nameless fear, or getting drunk and laying there in the room spinning around, I always usually opted for the latter. I'd rather get buzzed out and not worry about it. So addictions, people shouldn't be judged on the fact that they resort to self-medication. It's only because they don't know what's happening or it's a stress reliever. The reptilians strive to create compulsive behaviors within us. They strive to create self-destructive behaviors with us, whether it's addictions, compulsive behaviors, other self-destructive activities, sexual addictions, whatever the case may be, because all of these things can be utilized by the reptilian to control the person. Isolation and the feelings of isolation is a very effective control mechanism that the reptilians and aliens in general utilize on people. For example, if a woman is having these experiences, but her husband or her significant other is extremely negative about the subject, that tends to make the woman feel even more isolated, even more helpless, even more alone. The ETs and the reptilians will literally manipulate and program her spouse or significant other to even become agitated or angry when the subject comes up. So the end result of that is it pulls out one possible source of emotional support for the woman undergoing these experiences. And we can see the opposite happening with males going through experiences and the people around them being extremely negative. I was once punched out by my ex-brother-in-law, who I call him a closet case abductee, just based on the experiences he's had and the things he's described to me. I know he's had abductions, but one time I guess I punched one of his wrong buttons, bringing the subject up, because he just hauled off and slugged me. We got into a good fight, but that's just an example, of a control mechanism. And one thing that you should also realize too is, as abductees, and I know I'm talking to some of you in the audience, certain types of programming is instilled within many abductees to make them become agitated when they hear this information, to make them fall asleep or become sleepy or drowsy. Many times I've been giving lectures and I'd look over and someone just conked out because the information is such that it triggers a built-in response for the person to fall asleep, so they don't hear the information. Other trigger mechanisms are becoming agitated. Suddenly the overwhelming compulsion to get up and smoke a cigarette, the overwhelming compulsion to get up and simply leave. All of these things help to keep that abductee isolated and ignorant of information that may help them. One of the more controversial aspects of the reptilian abduction agenda is what is known as the crank program. The ETs and the reptilians create certain programs. There's what's been described as the Palladian New Age La-Di-Da program, where you come across blonde-haired women who believe that they're Palladian hybrid walk-ins, but they're really just having horrendous reptilian experiences, but they don't realize it because the programming and manipulation is such that they only are allowed to remember pleasant experiences, feel-good experiences. Then there are other programs, such as the crank program. The foremost pioneer in this facet of the reptilian research is my mentor, Barbara Bartley. Now, most of you are familiar with the problem of crystal meth, also and a derivative known as crank. But many of you may not realize that it is part and parcel of the reptilian abduction agenda. A colleague of mine, I haven't spoken to in a long time, is a guy named George Andrews. And he put together, compiled a book called Drugs and Magic, which is a synopsis of shamanic practices around the world, different cultures, where drugs are utilized in order to expand one's consciousness and to be able to interact and commune with non-human beings, very often interdimensional beings, but sometimes more corporeal beings. Drugs and Magic. If you can find that book, please get it. What the reptilians have done is, through their control of the human reptilian hybrids here on the surface, they have created this crank crystal meth pandemic. The reptilians resonate at a sympathetic frequency with crystal meth and crank. If you've studied the police blotters and the crime histories of people who are on crystal meth and crank, you will find certain commonalities. One, they are prone to like mayhem and berserk, sadistic, violent behavior. If you really peer closely, you'll find that many crank users are into perverse, outrageous sexual practices, including pedophilism and what have you. Because what the crank and crystal meth does is it affects the brain chemistry of the person using the drug. Now, I should mention that many people that are reptilian hybrids or host have a genetic predisposition to hosting or because of the long-term genetic manipulation. But someone who is a crank user or a crystal meth user needn't have that genetic predisposition. Crank use is a fast track to getting possessed, not only by reptilians, but like demonic entities in general. What the spouses and the significant others, the girlfriends of crank users have described is that when their husband or their boyfriend goes into a crank-induced rage, literally sometimes they're like a reptilian lizard-like image just suddenly comes over their face, like overshadows their face. Sometimes their pupils go vertical. Sometimes it manifests in other ways, such as a fascination with more perverse, kinky sex, for example. My mentor, Barbara Bartley, had spoken to a headhunter in the semiconductor industry in Silicon Valley. This guy was a computer scientist, and his job was to recruit software engineers, software designers in Silicon Valley. As such, he was privy to all kinds of interesting information.